If I can do 500 for 10 years, that'll give me $1 billion portfolio. It's just a numbers game. It's not about the money for me. At the end of the day, it's a game. I love it.
In that realm of construction, when you're like working with different subs, have you noticed that people have lagged on you or lagged a little bit because they've been a little hurt because you brought other people in?
Yes, you have some guys that get hurt. If you don't want it, we're going to get this person, but don't let that make you worried that you're not going to get the next opportunity.
How do you really hone in your takeoffs and your relationships with your subs or your contractors?
You start compiling data. You look across the last 10 jobs and you can say, okay, this is running $3 a foot. This is running $1.75 a foot. So then you start getting a good breakdown of what that's going to cost, a good rule of thumb. It's better to grow strong than it is fast. And giving you the opportunity to hire some guys under you to go to 500 doors. I'm just trying to give you first opportunity and let you grow now instead of us getting to 500 and you feeling like we're cutting you out.
Welcome to The Big Break Show, your go-to podcast for real estate investing, business acquisition, mindset, and lifestyle. Now, let's dive into Season 2 with your hosts, Rafa Loza and Dan Tollins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Big Break Show. And as always, with my man, Mr. Dan. What's up, brother?
What's up, bro?
How you doing?
Great.
Yeah, so we're still at the hotel. We're kind of making this our home-based studio now, so it's going to be fun. And we have a special guest for you guys today, still doing the in-studio recordings where people come visit us or people come talk business. We have our good friend, Mr. Josh Dixon. How you doing, man?
Good, brother. You?
I'm good, man. We're happy you're here.
Yeah, definitely.
So for those of you that don't know, Josh has built over 600 units, right? Multifamily homes, single family, pretty much everything, right? We were talking about what barndominiums also you've done?
We've done barndominiums, doctor's offices, nursing homes, a little bit of everything.
Okay. So tell everybody a little bit about who you are, your story. We want to know prior to investing, like what made you get into real estate,
Yep.
All that fun stuff, and then we'll get the ball rolling from there.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm Josh Dixon. I'm outside of Nashville, Tennessee. I grew up in construction. We have a family business that my uncles and grandparents had always had some form of construction going on. Started working with my uncles when I was 10. I'd always been on a job site prior to that, but at 10 we started working there. Went through all my summers, weekends, anytime I could. Went to college for civil engineering, but just good grades, but didn't like the books. Didn't want to sit behind a desk drafting all day. So quit, went back to my uncle, started running his business at 19 and stayed with him, would have never actually left. Loved working for him, loved being number two, never really wanted to be in the spotlight. But we, in 2008, things got slow like it did with a lot of people. And he had some stuff in Costa Rica, this, that, and the other. So by that time I had a couple of kids and I was like, I can starve on my own. So took a factory job, was working 58 hours a week at a factory at night, construction during the day. After about 3 or 4 months, I felt like we had enough work that we could just jump ship and then kind of went on our own. I guess what really got me started in investing was I was doing a lot of flips and rehabs and stuff for bankers and real estate guys. And I'm like, really all they have that I don't is money. So I was like, how do I get the money piece figured out? We found our first flip. It was $20,000. I remember freaking out because I was like, what are we going to do? It's 20 grand. Nobody's going to rent it because it's so low end. Nobody's going to want to buy it. I'm going to get stuck with this, have the money of flipping it. Anyway, so we bought it, $20K. We dumped a few $1,000s. 2 weeks later, we sold it for like $55,000. And I told my wife, I was like, okay, we can do this. So we just started rinsing and repeating. Then we moved into, bigger flips, and then we moved into multiple flips at a time, moved into spec homes while we was custom homes and stuff for other people. After we got to that level, my uncle did another subdivision. We kind of fell in there while he was doing that subdivision, doing our own, bought some lots from him, kind of helped him when we could. And we just started buying property. We made some big turns when we bought some pieces of property that we entitled, got ready, and ended up not developing them, selling them, gave a lot of cash flow. So now we've just been buying land. We got to invest in groups, started getting around the right rooms, the right people. Of course, y'all both know how much that impacts it. And so here we are, we're building. We got about 150 doors right now going. Our goal is to hit like 500. And we would like to, within the next year to 2 years, we'd like to be at 500 that we're building to possibly hold for ourselves on top of what we're building for other people, and just slowly build up that portfolio of new inventory, low maintenance, that's designed around what we're looking for in our asset class, instead of having to go find something that's already existing and revamp it. And so that's kind of our game plan right now. And just to stay in our lane of building, we tried different asset classes, or the shiny object syndrome. And we've just, in the last 6 months, decided, hey, we're just going to really home in on what we do and bring value to other people in what we do, and likewise get from other people what they do, but mainly just stay in our role, team up with good people, and just kind of crush that market, hopefully.
Yeah. So I actually have a question about your idea of wanting to grow your portfolio and hold at least 500 for yourself. Is that like a cash flow play, or like a equity play, or just like a security issue, like play? Like, what is it that why 500 specifically?
Because if I can do 500 for 10 years, that'll give me $1 billion portfolio. And so it's just a numbers game. It's not about the money for me. Of course, I've got a big family. Right. I got to provide stuff of that nature. But at the end of the day, it's a game. I love it. People's like, what do you do for hobbies? What do you do? And this is it. Yeah. Like it's playing some kind of board game with real life. But I like to not take risks that are unnecessary. So anything I can build, we're building at cost. So it's automatically a safer investment for me, because we don't feel like we're upside down in that investment. From day one, we have equity in there. So we just feel like it's the safest, most less stress asset that we can do. The 500 is just a number, if our thoughts are, if we hit half that goal, if we hit 10% of that goal, we've already made it as it is. We're comfortable. We feel blessed, and where we're at, what the Lord's done for us. But like, really, it's just something to shoot at. And we like the townhomes is where we're really focusing, just because of the exit strategies. There's a lot of other classes, but we're trying to just really maximize going into a deal, maximize all the in-betweens of the deals, and maximize the exits of a deal. And so 500 is kind of our projection, but that's just what we're shooting for.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about your family for a second.
Okay.
Because you said you have a big family, and obviously I know your family. So yeah. You have 8 children.
8 kids. Yeah.
You mind? I kind of want to dive into that a little bit, right? Because getting to know you over the last couple of days, also you've said a few things. How like at first you weren't sure you were going to have kids, and now you have 8 children.
Yeah.
And some people are going to go, "Wow, 8 children! Like,
yeah,
that's a lot of children, right?"
Yeah.
Some people are like 1, and they're like, "I've had enough." Yeah. So, first, do you plan on having more children?
No, we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, how's life with 8 children and then juggling the business? Something that you said that was very cool that I liked was like, it's like a game for you, because like, when you like what you do, it's not really a job.
Yeah.
You do it all day, every day. Talking about yesterday where we're like hanging out, and you're like, I don't really like hang out and watch TV. Like I want to do something, right? Yeah. So how is it doing that for the business side of things, but also having your 8 kids and your wife, and kind of figuring things out to making sure everything flows smoothly, works well with everybody?
Yeah. So I think it's definitely, you got to be intentional, just like your business. And, just like we set a projection to hopefully get to 500 doors, it's just a goal. So we have the same goals with our kids. I have trees that are planted in my yard that aren't big enough for my kids to play in, but they'll be big enough for my grandkids to play in. So that's like cool. We're constantly thinking to the end result of where we want to get there, and then try to map out that direction. I mean, we screw up like everybody else. There's no instruction manual like we was talking about with kids. Mm-hmm. So I love kids. I've always loved kids, but coming from my background, my parents split up, and there was some things of that nature, and I just never wanted to screw up a kid. So it wasn't that I didn't necessarily want kids. It was just I didn't want to mess up somebody else's life, Mm-hmm. So my wife, she comes from one of 6, all girls, and she's like, well, I want kids. I'm like, well, I'm not trying to keep you from having kids. We'll have a kid. I just don't want to mess them up. And we had one, and I was like, I'd have up to 7, but I want them back to back while I'm young.
Yeah. And
I want them all to be raised together, like real close. So, kind of set that in a go. We have 8 kids, but we have a 3-bedroom house. We got our room, a boys' room, and a girls' room. That's it. We didn't give them their own rooms. We gave them their own living room. They got their own kitchen. They got their own room where they can all hang out. But they got a big boys' room, big, huge bathrooms, big closets, and then they got the girls' suite like on the other side. So that was just kind of something I wanted to do, to let them fight, hash it out, and learn to like just be close and work through it. So,
dude, I love that. That's so unique.
I know, right?
I've never heard of that. Yeah. Sorry, continue.
No, so that's just, we had 7 kids. We thought we was done, and then we had the 8th kid came, and I was like, okay, this is a stopping for me. Not that I didn't want more kids or that I was unpleased with our 8th kid. He's been as enjoyable as any kid has had. I love it, but just it's real hard to be intentional. You know, I don't want to just have kids and not pour into them. And to your point of how do we do it with the business? So we're learning as we go, just like everybody else. We do homeschool because it kind of coincides with, hey, we're going to travel, we're going to go look at a different asset, or maybe I want to pack up and move so I can be close to a job since we're moving around doing a lot of work out of our state now. But then we try to work our kids in the business, let them make some money, but also be intentional. This may not be their passion. So we use it as a tool, but you also have to be intentional with like, okay, this kid, this isn't something they want to do forever. So even though there's very few things I know outside of construction, I try to find the right people to put my kids around, putting them in the right rooms that'll help them, and not just putting them in the rooms that I want them to be in or I want to be in. So,
well, speaking of rooms, right? That's kind of how we met. Was at a mastermind event, and actually all 3 of us were there. And it was a smaller group. It was like 20 people. And then we kind of went around the room and talked about, what everybody's problems were. And, I want to kind of talk a little bit about how in joining the groups that you've joined, when you're around all these people that are doing so many different things, to keep the main goal, and not having shiny object syndrome or trying to jump into something you don't really know anything about, or, how has that process been for you?
Yeah, so I'm guilty just like everybody else. So since that first time we met, I was doing a few events before that, view coaching groups, and have done stuff since. And like I've told you, I've went through that with other people of, I need to be doing what this guy's doing, or I need to be doing what this guy's doing, or I need to be what y'all are doing. And so it's only been probably in the last 6 months or maybe a year, but I would say just 6 months that I've kind of got really grounded and just woke up and like, no, you enjoy building, do what you enjoy. And in doing that, just in that short amount of time, like our business has really excelled. We went from, I probably did 27 homes last year, maybe, not counting like apartment stuff like we was doing for my uncle and this, to, we have 150 doors roughly going this year. I could very easily see us doing, 250 to 500 next year. So that being said, that was my journey from the time I started getting into those groups. Man, I always felt like I needed to be somebody else. And, but I've found more peace and just calmness and being like, no, I'm going to do what I do. And I'm going to let that be enough. And then if I can partner up with people that are good with what they do, and then just let it be a good blend, instead of like trying to learn every different facet of every different asset class.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like meeting up with guys like y'all. And even if you're meeting with those people and you don't do a deal together, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I've run across this deal. I've got this situation. I want to turn some of my townhomes into midterm, short-term type rental stuff. Could y'all guys guide me in that? And likewise, maybe y'all pick up a piece of property that you're not really sure and you can call. So I think just adding value everywhere you go and not having that weight of feeling like I got to be doing what everybody else is doing, just finding what you want. We talked earlier before camera here, and you was talking about there's certain things that it just doesn't excite you, and how lucrative it would be and easy for you to chase after some of that, but it just doesn't do that for you. And so I guess just always staying grounded and this is who I am, this is what I want to do, and focusing on that.
That's such a big deal too, because a lot of people are always running around thinking, I mean, in the beginning stages, you're chasing money so you can survive. But you come to a point where like, you got to figure out what it is that actually makes you happy.
Yeah.
Like once you find it, you're like, holy cow, I can do this. And it will eventually bring the money, right? I think that's a really, really big deal. Let's talk about construction a little bit and the actual weeds of like being in the business. Because when I first started real estate, I had no idea that you can actually like build a house and be that part of investing. I always thought you'd have to buy a house, put a renter in it, and make money. But then you learn about like the burst strategy, and you learn about all these different aspects of like getting in at certain cost and the house being valued way more and being able to refinance and keep your money out of the deal. And then you being the actual person doing the build, you're probably saving more money on the front end in terms of like material and things like that. Can you touch? I don't have a specific question about that. I want you to actually touch on the business side of like how it looks, how you figured out certain things, and like what you do different or how you do certain things. Like just anything specific from like ground up construction to the sale of an asset.
Yeah.
I'll give you a more detailed question.
Yeah, sure.
So kind of touch on what you're talking about, but like, the whole, one of the reasons you're here is that we had a land deal for sale fall through. And my partner and I said, if it fell through, we're going to go ahead and develop it ourselves. And, with your, saying townhomes is what we're going to do, you were the first person I reached out to, said, hey, why don't we talk a little bit about this? And then, we've been fortunate to hang out for 2.5 days. And, some of my questions to you have been like, one, what's your cost to build? And we kind of went over that versus what we're, paying here just as a bunch of one-off stuff. But I guess the more detailed question is like, how do you really hone in like your takeoffs and your relationships with your subs or your contractors? And then, we'll also talk about, a little bit of the payroll structure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, I guess, the original part of your takeoffs, being able to really dial in that on the front side so that throughout the course of the project, you've done most of your homework on the front side, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So in the beginning, when we first started, it was a lot different, of course, than it is now. Right. I remember the first time I ever went on my own and I was bidding my first custom home. And my uncle, I called him, I said, how do I tell these people how much it costs to build this? And he's like, well, it's $250,000. I'm like, I know it's $250,000, but how do I tell them that it's $250,000? It was just that we had done it so much, we just knew from the hip how much it would cost. And he's like, man, I don't know. So I called my other uncle. He's like, it's $250,000. I'm like, I know it's $250,000, but how this homeowner wants to know how I come to this point. Yeah. And he's like, I don't know. Just tell them it's $250,000. Take it or leave it. And so I'm young at the time, so I'm trying to build credibility. And so I talked to a couple other contractors and I realized that most of these guys have no idea. They just do it. And then so I broke it down. So I went back, I took that house and I literally built it from digging the footers to the roof deck, drywall, everything, and broke down everything you could put inside a house, every screw, every tube of caulk, every 2x4. And then I just got better. We started critiquing that, and we started putting better. Every time we ran into something that wasn't on that list, we'd add it to that list. We started getting commercial lists of people that were doing big commercial jobs and these big contractors, and they had lists that they would. So, oh man, we didn't think about dumpsters. We didn't think about our roll-offs, or we didn't think about, okay, we got to have some porta-johns on the side. Let's throw a number in there. And then you start building that relationship and you start compiling data. So now you're like, you look across the last 10 jobs and you can say, okay, this is running $3 a foot. This is running $1.75 a foot. This is doing this a foot. So then you start getting a good breakdown of what that's going to cost, a good rule of thumb. There's going to be some material that you may go over, and there's going to be some where you save and you go under. So to the point of now where we've created a SOV, a schedule of values, and you'll go through and we'll have a line item for everything in that job. And anytime we run into a new job that has a specific or something a little bit different, we try to catch that on the preliminary blueprints when we're reading through maybe the architect or notes of anything of that nature. And so then we just allot it. On townhomes, like I was saying earlier in the week, again, it's easier because once you get one unit done, just like a hotel or anything else, that unit's going to rinse and repeat. So then the other things you have to add in is Maybe one of them we looked at had an elevator in it. So, okay, what's that number going to be? Get on the phone, start calling, and call multiple people, get 3 bids, get a good average. Always maybe try to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So if you're adding the numbers up, you want to shoot at a higher number and try to come in under that, then instead of saying, okay, best case scenario, we can do it for this, and then you get in the middle of it and it doesn't go best case scenario, which often can be the case. So just really dialing in, building those good relationships over time. Follow your gut, man. I think all of us have been in that situation where we got burned on something. It's like, I knew I shouldn't have done that, or I knew I shouldn't have hired those people, or I knew I shouldn't have given them a check because they weren't going to come back. And so I think just getting confident in what you do, knowing what you're good at, getting other people that are good at the parts that you're not good at. And now that we've started building a team and we've got other people we're building checks and balances. So everything I'm talking about is stuff that we continually are growing on and want to always grow on and always have a check and a balance. Like, okay, I look at it from one perspective. My brother's now partnered with me, so he's going to look at it another perspective. And then maybe one of our admin guys is going to go over and look at it from their aspect. So as we're putting guys on job sites or project managers, where I've done it so long, I have to remember everybody doesn't have that same mindset or the same eye or the same vision as I do. So what comes second nature, and I just assume that they know how to do, I don't even know the right questions to ask anymore. So then I'll ask my admin guy or somebody that has no idea, my wife or one of my kids or just a new person on the job. I'll ask them questions to learn what they need to know, let them tell me what because I don't even know how to ask the right questions at point because, like I said, it's just so second nature anymore.
Well, as you're you talked about going from, last year you said 27 single family doors, right? And now you're wanting to work towards 500 multifamily doors, right? So to be able to, 20X that,
yep.
What are some things that you want to not rush through as far as like making sure everybody has their insurance and setting the expectation with pay and travel and, just all of those things so that you're not necessarily like, hey, I like you a lot. We've done a lot of things together. And then you get into something and all of a sudden you're halfway through or whatever. And it's just kind of the relationships start to break down. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So for me, we've really, as much as we want to grow to 500, every day, every week, I'm talking to them. It's better to grow strong than it is fast. So that's kind of the backdrop of everything we're doing. Like, yes, this is my projection, but not at the cost of this. Mm-hmm. So we try to take the guys that we've used for years and give them first opportunity. If they're really good subs or have been really good employees that have, we've encouraged to go on and be subs now, and they subcontract mainly for us. But then that allows them, they're not hourly, they can go by the foot or bid a job, and that allows them to grow and have some of their own ambitions and goals without feeling like they're tied to us and they're not limited. So first of all, we try to grow each sub and we try to help their business grow and coach them, realizing everybody's doesn't have the same goal to grow. A lot of our guys are like, dude, I'm perfectly happy doing X amount of jobs a year. I don't want any more.
Or just doing just your stuff, even though they're independent contractors, right? So they're not tied in. But you're like, hey, there's going to be opportunities outside of just working with us.
Yeah. So we had one guy in particular. He said, all I can handle is 100 doors. I can't go beyond that. I just don't have enough time. And I told him, I'm like, I don't expect you to do that. I'm giving you the opportunity to hire some guys under you to go to 500 doors. I'm just trying to give you first opportunity and let you grow now instead of us getting to 500 and you feeling like we're cutting you out. So we give them first dibs, but we ask them in return, don't take on more than you can chew. Don't bite off more than you can chew. And really having, at some point you have to regulate that for them because some of the guys can't regulate what they can actually complete and not just being, oh, he's done it for so long. He's done 25, 27 last year. He can do 150 this year. And really, he's not building the infrastructure. So the main thing I'm focusing on is admin stuff, office stuff. Project managers are good, but really we want in-office project managers that we can really spend a lot of time with, that can look at a set of blueprints, can say, okay, they can order all the doors from Tennessee. They can order all the door stops and the shingles. If we have the prints, if we have everything, they can handle that stuff. So the on-site guys are only focusing on getting it done really fast and really good quality.
Yeah.
So taking stuff off of certain people's plate and putting other things on their plate, and making sure everybody's staying in the most productive roles that they can to get the most done without overloading them.
I think that's a big deal, especially if you're trying to scale.
Yeah.
We talk about that quite often here. What's the biggest issue that you run into with like your subcontractors and the type of jobs that you're having them do, where you're like running into talking about scaling and making sure things are getting done right, of course, is like, I want to know what's one of the biggest growth heartaches that you've had with subcontractors, or them taking on too much more than they can handle.
Yeah, generally you got to be careful, because sometimes it hurts their feelings when you bring in another sub. And so just reassuring them, like, you've always got, next year is the same as long as you're doing me right, you helped me grow to this point. Like, this person's never going to replace you as long as we keep doing. And because it's an emotional for some people, and they don't understand that it's a big business deal. So if they say that they can do the 500 and they can only do 200, then that's a big cost. Not only does it cost you, carrying costs and stuff, but your other subs can't start until they get done. And then that doesn't just affect them and you, it affects everybody else in that team, or everybody else. So I look at everybody as one big ecosystem, and it's just like, if one domino starts, then all of them are going to go. But if one stops, then that process stops until you go back again. So that's one. Travel. Everybody doesn't want to travel. And so building a system where we're working in multiple states now, we're looking at jobs. We've currently got jobs going in 3 states, but we're looking at 5 or 6, maybe even 7 states right now, jobs we're trying to potentially get online. So everybody not wanting to travel, building an ecosystem where they can still have a family. Having a big family, like, that's important to me, that they have time with their wife or their kids, or just their own enjoyments and ambitions in life. So we're working through that. Some of the things we look at is like, okay, maybe we do 3 months on, 3 months off, or maybe you want 3 months, you work 9 months and then you got a 3-month lag, because some of the people, it's not about the money, it's about experiences of life, but making enough money to do that. So we're pretty open and flexible, as long as it's not just flying by the seat of your pants, which is how I built my business. Ironically, everything's been just fly by the seat, figure it out as you go. Yeah. But as you scale, you really have to have some discipline and say, no, this is how it is. Now, we'll work with a system, but once we figure out the system, we have to stay on this system. Or if this system's not working, we got to carry it out until we develop another system. So I think the travel is really hard, and getting them to grow, because you hear a lot of people say, oh, I just can't find nobody to do it. You have 1 million doors going up a year, I think it is. I'm not for sure. Somebody's doing it. I've got a buddy that's in the insulation business, and they crush. They do really good, but he can't scale because him and his brother and his nephew do all the work a lot of times. And I'm like, well, get somebody else, set up another machine. He's like, well, there's nobody else that does it. I'm like, dude, get on the yellow pages. There's insulation companies everywhere. Yeah. You just got to find somebody, poach somebody, whatever you want to do, but you got to train somebody, because you can't scale doing it by yourself. So I think there's always that opportunity to find somebody. You just got to be willing to work to get to that point.
So when you were talking about, going back to the admin stuff, you're really concentrating on now, is that from your experience of kind of, doing what we've done is shoot, aim, ready? We're kind of doing stuff ass backwards, as opposed to having all our ducks in a row, all of our books cleaned up, all of our taxes done, all these, having the capital raise partners in place, or having the bank relationships in place. And so did you kind of figure that out just from being in some of these groups and that are all, apartment heavy, that kind of said, hey, in order to do this, you really need to clean up, the front side of things, or is it just one of those your own kind of, you recognize it yourself that was kind of a shortcoming?
I would say it's a hybrid, because I'm the type of guy that's like, get out of the way, I can do it faster myself, and that's not scalable. It's a burden. You get stressed, you get burnt out, and you wake up every other day thinking, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
I'm quitting. And then you're like, I really like it. And then I'm quitting. Then, I gotta have a different pace. So just having a family and getting burned out, you're not giving yourself to them. Building custom homes, as much as I enjoy tackling a problem or trying to make a very ornery or picky client happy just to prove that we do really good work, it was just taking so much from me that, you hear all these people in the coaching groups, the really good ones, talking about delegating. And I don't know how to delegate. Like, I'm just not a good delegator. And so what we've actually done is, my new admin is, he'll sit down and working through getting the things out of my brain. Like I said, a lot of this is so second nature that I don't know I'm not a good teacher always. Mm-hmm. So getting things out of my brain, he's like, can you write out a list of how you do this, or who's the right people, or let me have your phone and get your contacts, and learning how to just pull that information out, give it to somebody else that can structure it for the next guy. And we're really in the early stages, so it's not like I know what I'm doing. I just see the value of, if I'm going to scale, the biggest ROI on my time right now is meeting with guys like y'all, whether it's doing a deal with you, or whether it's you calling up saying, hey man, we got a great opportunity over here. Somebody's wanting 100 units and maybe we come in and build it, or maybe it's something we want to hold. One thing I don't want to get into right now is management side.
Yeah.
Maybe down the road we build in-house management, but it's not something I want to learn. I don't want to lose track of building the actual ground up side because I'm having to deal putting out fires on learning the management piece.
Right. I think that's so important. I mean, I was at a mastermind earlier in the week, and it was kind of like 20 more people like us, right? And they're kind of going through, and Jake Sullivan was there, and he's like, I have no interest in becoming a lender, even though he's got a surplus of capital. He's like, I have no interest in doing that. I have no interest in selling anything. Like, there's a lot of people who are like, I'm gonna get to 5 years and get rid of it, or just a bunch of fix and flip, or figure out what's next. He's like, he's got his systems and processes dialed in, and he's like, just stay true to himself.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like a really solid guy.
It always goes back to that initial, like, what is it that you like to do, and not following what everybody else is doing. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big part of it. So going back to you guys, something you said, like setting that expectation up front for them when you're like working with different subs. Have you noticed that people have like lacked on you, or lagged a little bit because they've been a little hurt because you've brought other people in? Or do they step up to the plate and say, hey, I'm going to find more people? Like, in that realm of construction, how do you find that aspect of thing being handled? Because obviously that's also part of that delegation piece, being able to delegate that work to them to be able to scale your business.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the communication, yes, you have some guys that get hurt. I think the communication is key. Maybe giving them up front, like say, hey, we have this opportunity.
Right.
If you don't want it, we're going to get this person, but don't let that make you worried that you're not going to get the next opportunity.
But you also got more than one thing going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they have a certain amount of limitation that they can work on jobs of a certain size. Yeah. And then I think, like you talk about communicating.
And then we also, I mean, just to be honest, my uncle told me one time, he's like, you don't have to tell everybody everything. Mm-hmm. I would announce to all my subs, well, I'm going over here, and I could never get away from everybody. They's always tracking me down. He's like, dude, just give them the job, give them the task. So I think communicating to them is key. And then your good subs, they'll say, hey, you might want to pick somebody else. They'll tell you. Your really good subs will tell you, I can't handle this. Go ahead and get somebody else on this one, but don't forget about me. And you're going to have some that you just got to let go, and it's an emotional thing. If you don't want to let those people go, you don't want to get somebody else. But at the end of the day, it's like a lot of times they're not concerned with your vision or your go or your growth. They have their own business. And if something come up, you think about how many times I'll be there on Monday morning and they don't show up till Thursday because they go fishing or they do whatever. And it's like, I try not to do a tit for a tat, but at the same time, as long as I've communicated it, as long as I've told them, as long as they had the opportunity, if it comes to a crossroad where we can't trade for a while or ever, then just emotionally being like, hey, if we can ever come to terms again, I'd love to work with you, and not burning bridges, being like, I love to do business with you, but right now this just isn't working out, and having those hard conversations. But I think most of those can be avoided with good communication. Maybe you don't do deals together, but there's never a burnt bridge generally.
How do you deal with subs that don't finish the projects in time? Like you said, they're out doing whatever it is that they're doing, and you're on a timeline.
Man, we only push when we have to push. So I try to be pretty lenient. In the beginning, what I would do, I was raised, my uncle that I worked for so long, he's basically, if you can't fire a sub and finish his job, you don't need to be in construction. So he would send me with plumbers and electricians and roofers. So in the early years, I would just go finish it myself. I'd be like, screw it, I'll go. But then I found myself working nights and weekends or whatever it took to get the job done. Now, I just really portray deadlines. On our bigger commercial stuff, we start putting contracts and stuff on our smaller stuff, not so much, but on the bigger things, we're like, hey, you can't get a check until it's done. We're going to hold a 10% retainage on you. As long as you do your job, there's no problem. And just really communication again is having a really good schedule and saying, look, we have to have you here. And it doesn't always go right. And maybe something you don't necessarily convey to them is that you automatically know what people are like. And so you put buffers in there that they don't know about, that helps you not overestimate in your brain what you can really accomplish. We're going into, the holidays now. So I keep telling my guys in the office, my brother and my admin and stuff like that, I'm like, it's going to slow down. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to work right up till Thanksgiving, and then I'm going to work right up. They're not. They're going to take off. You're going to have bad weather. You're going to, in Nashville anyway, weather's going to start changing. You're going to start getting rain. You're still going to start getting snow. You're going to get the holidays. People are going to want to be off. So anticipating those things and not mankind is mankind. Trying to change them is like, it's not going to work. So, dialing in on subs that automatically have a good character, even though they're maybe have some quirks, if they got really good character and they do what they say and they work hard and got good ethics about them, that helps a lot. But I think just having those buffers and real expectations and communicating. So one thing we do, like on our checklist that I have that we're building for our guys, project managers, is when we're framing a house, we call the cabinet guy. We're like, hey, they're framing. As soon as they get done, we need to measure. And then as soon as they get done, he's already had that phone call knowing, instead of waiting, saying, we're done framing, can you come measure these? We're calling the drywall guys, hey, we're done framing, the electricians or plumbers start, we want you there in 2 weeks. After a week and a half, we say, we still good? And making 2 or 3 phone calls before they ever hit the job site. When we take on a job, we're calling all the subs, hey, we're taking on this job. Are you in for this? This is what we're projecting. And calling ahead of time and making sure that you're staying their ear. It's just like, recognition. When people see you all the time and they need a project built, they're like, oh yeah, I saw him the other day, or I saw him on Instagram. I forgot he was building. But if you're staying in front of it all the time, they're like, hey, hey Josh, would you build me something? Same thing with your subs. If you're staying in front of them and keeping it on the forefront, they're like, oh, I can't take that job, or I need a schedule because I told him this is coming. So it helps with your delays. I'm not going to say you won't have any, but that's one of a few things we do to stay ahead of it.
And you're in what, 5 different markets?
Right now we're in Nashville, South Carolina, and Georgia. We have one we're trying to get going in North Carolina. We have another one we're looking at in Texas. But basically, we're in 3 today.
Okay. So going back to the team, How difficult has it been finding those teams? Are you moving your teams, like they're traveling with you to build these different markets, or do you have like a long list of subs for backups of subs in these specific markets that you found?
Yep.
Right. And then on top of that, give a little bit of how you found them.
Okay, really good question. So it's a mixture. I have some guys that travel from home. So I really like to keep my project managers are, of course, ours. They travel. And we have punch guys like that do our trim and floor and a few of those items that travel. So I like to, especially your punch out stuff, I like to have the guys travel that we can as much as possible because they'll double down while they're there and they'll keep check on things. And they're the kind of your finesse guys, your finishers. And if they run into any problems, they'll pick up the phone and either say, hey, we got this, we fixed it, or you need to send somebody out here. And they're another set of eyes. My brother Jordan has partnered with me this year. And the last 7 years, he's been traveling, building restaurants, doctors' offices, maybe a few vet clinics and stuff. So over the last 7 years, he's really built up a really good network of traveling subs. So a lot of those guys, if they're in Georgia, they cover all of Georgia, or if they're in North Carolina, they'll cover all of North Carolina. And he's been working from anywhere from Illinois to Florida to mainly everything southeast and a little north of Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and places like that. So he has a really good network of concrete, HVAC, framers. So we use as much of that. If we run into an area where we don't have someone, of course, we put it out to bid. And we're going to call your local, if you're looking for a drywaller, you call your local supply houses that supply drywall, give us your top 5 guys, and then we'll start calling, we'll get bids. We'll kind of get a feel of how big's your company, how many guys, how many days is it going to take to do this project, and we'll work through it that way. So it's a hybrid of all those things.
Talk a little bit about the cash flow side of things, right? I think a lot of people think, you can go build and do whatever it is that you're doing, but how much kind of financial strain or stress gets thrown on you as the builder when you're working with somebody that's, either self-paying versus somebody that's, going through a bank loan and the draw process, and how often they can do a draw versus how often your guys are expecting to get paid?
Yeah. So especially on your smaller jobs, everybody wants to get paid when the job's done or at the end of the week. We built up to where we always tried to have enough cash on hand to cover 2 to 3 months of expenses. So if we're running $250,000 months, we want $500 to $750 in the bank account. Now, as we're scaling that, of course, that's a strain. We've always, since the beginning, we do a 30-day bill cycle. So our invoices all come in on the 30th to the 1st. And then we'll add up all of our guys' labor, subcontract, and then we add our percentage on top of that. And then we try to bill between the 1st to the 3rd and try to get a check back by the 10th. But one of the things you run into is, as I've talked before about, like, I come from a labor side, so I know how important it is for these guys getting started to need their checks. So we're cutting checks whether we're getting paid or not, as long as we can. There may be a time where I belly up, but that's one of our goals, is to always pay our subs as quickly as we can. Now, some of the bigger jobs, when you're doing these commercial jobs and you have a bigger electrical company come in or a bigger HVAC company, we'll say we pay on a 30-day billing cycle. So you have to bill us and we'll pay you just like we bill, you bill. Mm-hmm. Are you good with that? And because we're like, we can't cover $500,000 checks right now. So are you good with billing on the 30th? And some of the banks are a real struggle, especially when you get into billing for somebody that's got, some of these big corporate banks or something of that nature. And they have all this stuff all these forms you have to fill out, and they have all of these certain ways you have to submit it, or to them, you're just a number. Yeah. They don't care. Get your paperwork in order. Mm-hmm. So making sure that all of that to keep that money flowing, that's a whole nother thing in itself. And that's something I don't handle. Like, I try to stay at a high view of it and be like, are you covering this? Do you got this in the right format? I couldn't put it in that format if I wanted to. Yeah. If I'm writing a bill, it's on a Walmart pad, a statement book, handwritten. I give it to you, and that's all you're getting from me. I'll give you a copy of every receipt, but we never get paid for anything up front. So like we do a 30 days worth of work. You only pay us for what we've done. And that's how we've just always, I've never done contracts until lately. And that's only because people's wanted me to do contracts. Like my family's just never done that. If we couldn't trust you, you couldn't trust us. We didn't do the deal.
Yeah.
And that's burnt me a couple of times, I guess. But, you know, we have a really good reputation where we're from. And that's just kind of my values, you know, going into, and I don't want to lose that. So I know we have to have some systems. We have to have some contracts, but like my word is a lot to me. So if somebody's like, well, I think you're lying, I'm like, you know what? You keep your money, you know, but we're not completing this job. And I've walked off jobs like that before. I've had one job and only walked off really one job. And it was really hard for me because I've never quit something like that. But they were real rude to my clients, my subs and my in-house guys, and just calling me. And one night they called me. I was at supper with my kids, and basically I sent them all the receipts and this, that, and the other. And they thought, well, maybe I was making up receipts. So I actually sent them a bank statement, or they send you the checks back. I'm like, I don't know how much more clear you want me to get, but I've just given you my bank statements, everything I've done. Oh, by the way, I'm not coming back. Like, if this is how it's going to be and I'm going to have to prove myself all the time, we're not the right fit for each other. And, you know, it was affecting my family life and stuff. And my uncles was like, why don't you go file a lien on them? And I'm like, well, you know, if I file a lien and I get the money, every time we see each other forever, it's always going to be the same thing. You know, there's going to be that tension. I said, but if I leave and they owe me money, they're never going to talk to me like that. You know, they're always going to have that feeling of, man, I didn't pay that guy that money. And to me, that was a better feeling than having the money. So
that's kind of interesting. It's funny because, you know, he knows I've had some issues with some contractors in the past that rolled out on me. So it's kind of like to see a different perspective from some, and I wasn't the guy like nagging him. We were partners, right? We were like partners on this deal. Actually, as a matter of fact, he left on us because he didn't complete the work. And I was the opposite. Like I never followed up because I trusted the work to get done, and the work never got completed. So anyway, long story short, so we're no longer in business together. Yeah, and I'm okay with that. So I want to. We're getting here to the top of the hour, but before we ask you questions, we ask everybody. I just want to touch a little bit on like the overall growth of the business. Like you've obviously expanded. You're trying to grow to these 500 units. Like how does that look like for you going forward in terms of the type of projects you take on? Because you've done townhomes, you know, condos, single families, custom builds, right? Unique stuff. I mean, we're talking about doing like treehouse stuff, right? And now you're doing apartment complexes and you're doing large townhomes. Are you going forward in order to scale? Are you going to like tone back? I know you touched a little bit about toning back on like the custom homes for yourself, but like, are you going to tone back on the type of projects and the size that you take only to work on those because you're just good at those? Or is it just because you want to be able to grow in that capacity to do that type of asset only, like the townhomes or something? For sure. For me, we will hopefully, after we get done with the custom homes that we're on, those won't be something we take on. I've told my brother, I'm like, if you want to take them on and they're not affecting our business, have at it. But for me, you start to learn that time is very, very valuable the older you get. And so wanting to spend more time with my kids, my oldest son, he really would love it if I would just quit and maybe build townhomes, just be in the family, you know, and teach him how to frame, which I have to an extent, but like where we go in and we put the footers in and the plumb them and we wire them and we do all the things because we're licensed for a lot of that as well. And so really we're toning back to where I'm trying to set up procedures, trying to set up the right team, trying to set up the right networking going forward. 25 units is something we'll do. We can do 25 units in a lot of places. We've looked at a few that are smaller, but 25 units you can get somebody in. We're doing maybe some carry back as a contractor because we're paying so much in interest. So that's something we've offered at a 25 unit and up. And then really would like to get to where a lot of them's 100 units, 25 to 100 units. I don't really want to go 200 and 300 units in one location because
you get trapped there. Where if you've got your infrastructure done, you can knock out 100 units in a year, pretty close or something. If you've got the money flow and everything's running right, a lot of times that's what hinders a project is money flow. So definitely focusing on townhomes. That's if we were just putting blinders on, that's all I would focus on. We may take on an apartment complex if it made sense. Outside of that, it would just have to be something fun that we was just doing, that just to say we did it for ourselves. But far as if somebody called me up and said, "Hey, would you build me 3 tree houses?" I'd be like, "No, man, that's it." Not that it doesn't make some money, but really trying to get to where all I do is do this. I'm networking. I'm flying out, looking at a job, saying, yes, this is a good deal. No, this is not a good deal. And even before that, like in our custom homes, we got to where we have a custom questionnaire, because I was spending so much time meeting with clients. So we got a QR code, they scan it, they get online, they fill out their information. By the time we actually sat down, I knew whether this was a decent fit, and they knew whether it was a decent fit. So we're working on that to where we're building a checklist for anybody that wants to build townhomes. So they fill out our checklist. Yes, my property is not in a flood zone. Yes, we have sewer. Yes, we're in the right kind of location and the right zoning for this. And so we walk through that process beforehand. We give that information to them basically for free. If it all works out, then we go build out their deal. So just really maximizing my time and my team's time, because I don't want to just delegate off to them either, because their time is also valuable.
Right. You want to keep them busy. Dude, you make it sound so easy. It's crazy. Right? Like, oh, yeah, it's just, regular Tuesday, we're putting up 300 homes. So I'm like, I'm working on one. Yeah. It's been 9 months. Okay, cool, dude. I mean, any final questions here? I know we're at the top of the hour. I know you're pretty excited about getting started on new construction. So we've been talking about it for a while here in Carolina Beach, obviously, Yeah. So, all right. Well, being that this is the big break show, we always ask, is there a defining moment that was your big break in life that got you to where you're at today?
Yeah, I think I would have to do 2. My first big break was my flip, just the mindset. Even though this was just a $20,000 investment that made me $30K, man, you don't have to work by the hour anymore. And so I think that was the first big break. The second big break that really started projecting me in the right rooms was my first coach. It was an online coach, 1 hour a week, Sean Whalen, I've talked to you about. And while I'm not in that coaching group anymore, I have to say it was the first time I started thinking, oh, I can do something other than staying in Smith County and a population of 20,000 people, even though we kill it there. We're really networked there. The mayors, everybody. We have lunch. I hang out. I know everybody. It just opened me up to, it's a numbers game, dude. Everything is just a numbers game, and not stressing about it, and learning as you go, making it fun, and being like, okay, well, if we can do 500 units, we do 500 units. If we can't, it's okay too. Yeah. And just having those dreams and ambitions. But yeah, first break was really getting that first big taste of, oh man, I made it. And then the second one was getting into a coaching group that made me think, okay, there's other people like me out there.
Yeah, me too. The second question is, what is the greatest piece of advice that you've ever received?
So like we all went to church this morning. So I have to say, God and salvation, that's really, I don't ever want people to assume that I have some superpower aside of him. So, but the greatest advice is really just getting in those right rooms, thinking outside the box. I wouldn't say it was one piece of advice, but my dad has always taught me. I'll say this is the best piece of advice I can ever remember. I got to a point one time where I could not make decisions. I'm so analytical. I didn't want to make the wrong deal. And so I would analyze something to the point that it drove me nuts. I'm like, Dad, what do I do? And this has not been that many years ago. I didn't want to do a deal unless I knew it was going to be over the fence. It wasn't a first base, a second base. I had to have over the fence grand slam deal. And so I'm like, what do you do making the right decisions? He's like, son, you just have to trust that God's given you the wisdom and that you've really homed in on this, and you make the best decision you can. And all you have to do is be right more than you're wrong. And just that thought of, I just need to get over 50%. Right. You know what I'm saying? Just like occupancy, you imagine you trying to find a deal that I can't do this deal unless I'm at 100% occupancy all the time.
Yeah.
And every deal you did, you ran the numbers, it had to be 100%. And so the same thing for me, that's what I was trying to do in life and business. I always had to be at 100%. And, that wasn't me in school. So finally coming to that realization of 75, 80%, that's pretty good, And I think that was probably one of the best pieces of advice, because I always revert back to that, is be right more than you're wrong, and just get around the right people, learn, always be growing. And that
was great, dude. I appreciate you sharing that. Actionable step for the listeners and viewers that they can take after this episode based around our conversation.
Yeah, if I had to, watching all the people that I watch, big Hermosi fan, and a lot of podcasts I watch, I think picking one thing and getting really good at it. I did not do that. Like when I first started, I would wire your house, I would plumb your house, I would frame. And then I got into GC and I would still do part of that. And so I wouldn't advise my kids to necessarily go back and go through everything that I've went through. While all the knowledge that I have of building is a very, very, very big asset, it also held me back a lot. Like I could be a lot further with a lot less knowledge if I had surrounded myself with people and stuff sooner. So I really think finding one thing and homing in on it, and don't diversify until you get that one thing to where you're the best at it, or one of the best at it, So picking one asset class, whatever that is. And it's not all about making money in the beginning. My 17-year-old he's got a really good mindset. He's like, Dad, I don't care if you pay me. I just want to be around you. I want to be in your business. I just want to learn, because he sees the value of me putting him in coaching groups and being around the right rooms. He sees the value of, it's not the money. And I'm really proud that he sees that, because not all people get to see that early. So I think just picking one asset, whatever that is, and be an apprentice, mentor under somebody, and realize how much, if they're giving you their time to train you like that, dude, that's huge. I didn't have that. All the mentors that my uncle allowed me, and he mentored a very small bit, it was like, don't screw it up. He would throw you out there and be like, but it wasn't, this is how you do it. It was like, go figure it out. Yeah. So I do appreciate that. But like the mentors that sit down and teach you, I've had to pay for all those. So if you've got somebody that's willing to invest and take you under their wing, like soak it up like a sponge, focus on one thing, get really, really good at that. Let that start fueling your money. Once that gets big enough, then you can diversify.
I love that. That's great advice, man. Thanks. Well, another great episode.
Dude, banger.
Yeah, this was really good, dude. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, dude. We went over quite a bit of stuff. I mean, we can go another hour about this, so I appreciate you coming over here.
Yeah.
Anything you want to share with the audience in terms of where to get a hold of you, social medias, anything that you want to put out there for them?
Not really. I mean, on Dixon Homes, if you need me, you can find me.
That's right.
We're very selective on who we work for, so we don't advertise a lot and things of that nature. It's very organic, and we like it that way because it puts us with the right people.
That's right.
So, yeah, man.
Yeah, I love that, dude. I appreciate you coming on and sharing. I love the fact that to end it here, I love the fact that you are now to the point where you get to pick and choose who you work with, where you work with, and when you do the work.
Yeah.
That's huge, dude. So
it's very relieving. It's more important than the money for sure.
Yeah, 100%, dude. Once you get to that point, you're like, hell yeah. It's fun. Well, thanks, dude.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Been great.
That was really good.